what he has to say, which is an overview of his flood analysis. But also we want to hear from you, flooding history, observations on areas that were worse flooded, flood damages, water elevation, and then ideas for what we've done to help mitigate the flooding. So I'm just going to run through maybe 20 minutes of presentation here, and along with my colleagues, we'll take any questions about what I said, and then we could gather around the tables and mark up some maps and take some notes, and we'll go from there. So the purpose of tonight's meeting, I'm going to explain what an LFA is, a local flood analysis. I'll just step through quickly what that involves. I'll introduce our project team, and I'll explain the public meeting process that's going to happen from here forward. In parallel to this meeting, we're also doing a similar analysis in Mount Tremper. I'll review the boundaries of the study areas, and introduce some of the concepts and tools that we use as we approach flood analysis. And then, as I said, we'll work with all of you to collect information about flooding and flood damage, and discuss and hear ideas for potential flood mitigation strategies. This is our project team. These are the team leaders. I won't go through name by name, but I want to just introduce the two people who are here with me tonight. My name is Mark Caravetta. My office is in New Paltz. And with me is Janine Gowan, who's a principal at our firm and also the director of our water resources group. And then Vernon Bevan, who's a hydraulic and water resources engineer who works with me in New Paltz. So this is our core team. The folks, engineers who do hydraulic modeling in our office, and then other support staff, and they have expertise in everything ranging from cost-benefit analysis to mapping and other areas that we need to cover as we go through this.
And we only wear suits and ties and we get our pictures taken.
That's right. So the flood analysis process, it involves some field work, meetings such as this, where we evaluate the causes of flooding and we look for options for flood reduction or flood mitigation. The process includes property owners, municipal officials, and other stakeholders. And we don't start from scratch. We start, there's a lot of information that's already put into this area. FEMA has put together flood models for Esopus Creek and Stony Clove Creek. The county and the town have put together hazard mitigation plans, so we look to those, and we build on that information. And then we are able to use hydraulic modeling, and I'll talk a bit more about what hydraulic modeling is and what it involves, to assess potential flood mitigation strategies, what sort of reduction in flood levels each one would have. Then we'll come back here, we'll refine the alternatives, get some public input. We'll look at the costs and benefits of each alternative that we're trying. And the final result is an implementation plan where we make recommendations for flood mitigation. So why was Phoenicia selected for this? Well, I'm sure many of you know the answer to this. Have devastating flooding. Not just in Irene, but prior to that and other storm events. There's critical infrastructure and businesses that remain vulnerable to flooding. This funding opportunity presents the town with a unique opportunity to assess flood mitigation. And because we're in the New York City watershed, the funding, it's eligible for funding through that program. Now, this is a graph. This is overall precipitation in New York that's been tracked since for most of the last century. And you can see there's a general trend of increasing overall precipitation. So it's a little unknown what will happen off the chart here in the future, but it does appear that overall precipitation is increasing over the last century. And then, of course, not just average precipitation, but we seem to be seeing an increase in intense magnitude storm events, like we saw in Irene and Lee. You can see this is a rainfall map, and the darker color, the more you go red and purple, is the more rainfall. Up here's 20. So in areas of Greene County, we had in the 14 to 16 inch range, and in a lot of Ulster County, and of course the headwaters of Stony Clove are up here in Greene County, and Sophus Creek is up here, and we had 8, 10 inches of rain, so pretty impressive amounts of rainfall. And so how did Tropical Storm Irene measure up on sort of how frequently this sort of storm might happen? Well, FEMA puts out numbers. They estimate a 100-year storm, a 50-year storm, and that means each year that storm has a 1 in 100 chance of occurring. And you can see this graph here. It shows peak flows for the various years going back to the 1950s. And there's Irene right there on Esopus Creek. It peaked at 29,300. And you see down here, that exceeds the 50-year storm. It doesn't quite hit the 100-year storm on Esopus Creek. And here's the same sort of graph, but for Stony Clove up in Chichester. There have been some pretty big storms here on Stony Clove, but Irene being the biggest one that we've had since the 50s. And it peaked at 14,300, which again exceeds the 50-year storm, but didn't quite reach the magnitude of the 100-year storm. So as I said, we have two project areas, Phoenicia and Mount Tremper, and tonight's meeting is to talk about Phoenicia. And this is the project area, the specific areas of Esopus Creek and Stony Clove Creek that we're focusing on. It starts right at the Woodland Valley Bridge on Esopus Creek. Here's Esopus Creek coming down like this. We start at Woodland Valley Bridge, and then from the Route 40 bridge down about 2 3/4 miles to this point down here, right by the campground there. We're evaluating that whole reach of Esopus Creek, and then from Stony Clove, from the confluence here where it flows into Esopus, and then extending about 1.25 miles up from Main Street to where that line is. So that's the focus area of our study. And of course, extending out on both sides of the state to anywhere that's flooded by these watercourses. That's just a quick map to remind you, we're also working on a similar process in Mount Tremper, and we'll be holding a meeting there next Monday night. And that includes Esopus Creek and the Beaver Kill. So, as I'm sure you are all aware, Phoenicia has sustained a lot of flood damage. I just put these two slides up as an example that it's not just flooding that occurred. This is an aerial photo from 2009. If you orient yourself here, this is Route 28 crossing over Esopus Creek. Stony Clove is coming in right here. This line, I just drew this line on the photo, the white line. It represents the right bank as you're going downstream. And I'm just going to toggle to the next photo here. And you can see I've drawn the red line where the new edge of the water is. So you can see that the creek has really migrated here. I know there's some critical infrastructure having to do with the water supply system over here. So it becomes about more than just structures flooding, also damaged critical infrastructure, bridges overtopping, and also water quality. Anytime there's flooding, a lot of pollutants get mobilized, cars get inundated, septic systems, swimming pools, and that contributes to water quality problems. So a lot of bad things happen when it floods. There's a committee that is formed per the Shandaken Town Board. It's called SAFARI. It stands for the Shandaken Area Flood Assessment and Remediation Initiative. It consists of the Ashokan Watershed Stream Management Program, which under that has Ulster County Soil and Water Conservation District, New York City DEP, and Cornell Cooperative, as well as the town of Shandaken. Shandaken residents and business owners are involved. The Ulster County Department of Environment and our own firm are all, we've met several times to to decide on the project boundaries and decide how this process will go forward, and we'll continue to meet as this goes forward. Just to step through the public meeting process, back in September, we made a similar presentation to the Shandaken Town Board so they would understand how this process would work. And then we have tonight's meeting in Phoenicia here, and as I said, next Monday we'll have a similar meeting in Mount Tremper. We're going to collect a lot of information from you, and then dates yet to be determined. We're going to have 2 more meetings where we're presenting the results of our analysis and get a reaction from you, get some feedback. And then at the end, we'll go back to the town board and present them with our results. Just a little bit about the hydraulic modeling. This is a tool that we use. It's one of several tools that we use when we analyze different flood mitigation strategies. This is a view of Esopus Creek. It's no particular, this is in the area of Shandaken, and you can see in the model, the creek is made up of cross-sections. And each of those cross-sections looks like this. If you were to slice the river, and you're actually standing in the river looking straight upstream or downstream, so you can see this is what the river looks like, survey points going across, and elevations. And we can go, and this one shows a bridge, and a bridge there. So we're able to go into the model, maybe take out a bridge and see what happens, make the channel wider or deeper in some area, and see what influence that has on water surface elevations in other places. And that's a kind of an oversimplified version of how these models work. And another way to look at these models is in profile. So if you were standing at the side of the Esopus Creek watching the water come down right to left, it's flowing downhill. There's Woodland Valley Road, there's Route 28, and there's Bridge Street. You can see that these 2 bridges get over top. The lines represent different magnitude floods, and you can see those 2 bridges are overtopping in the larger floods. You can also see that the water in the bigger storms, the water sort of piles up behind the bridge here. So if you were to replace that bridge with a bigger bridge, what would happen to water surface elevations up here? You know, that's the sort of thing we test out with these models. These are some potential flood mitigation strategies that we've tried in other places, and they're the types that we will likely try here. Altering the channel, whether it's widening it, realigning it, altering the floodplain, whether it's taking an area that was once floodplain and that's been filled and reclaiming it so the water could flood that area. That sometimes can create a reduction in water surface elevations in another area. As I said, bridge replacement in some communities where a bridge is undersized and water backs up behind it can be beneficial for taking structures out of the floodplain. Sediment management strategies, or the individual treatment of individual structures, such as floodproofing, elevation of the structure, or relocation. These are things we tried in other places and we'll be likely to try them here. So what will the final outcomes be of this study? A scientifically based engineering analysis. For those strategies that seem to have merit, we'll do a full benefit cost analysis. So we'll say here's the value of the flood reduction under that strategy. And here's what it costs to build that. And then we can compare and see if it's cost effective. You know, if you're spending $1 million to take one small building out of the floodplain, it's not going to be cost effective. But hopefully we'll find strategies that are cost effective. We'll do sketches of mitigation options and come up with preliminary cost benefits or cost estimates for the ones that are feasible. And what we really create here is a blueprint. Some of the strategies we develop can probably be implemented in the near term. Others will be put into longer term planning documents. Maybe there's a bridge that's undersized, we can't afford to replace it right now, but next time that bridge needs to be replaced, we'll have the evidence that it ought to be replaced with a larger structure. So some of these strategies will be longer term. And we'll have a better understanding of what is feasible and what is not in terms of flood mitigation with your input. And at this point, I don't know if Janine, you have anything you want to add to what's been said, but maybe.
No, but we are really interested in hearing more from you folks. Let me stand up so you can hear me. We, as part of some work that we've been ongoing with New York City DEP, were on the ground immediately after Irene and Lee. So we've seen a lot of these sites, particularly in Phoenicia, during the worst flooding. So we come with a little bit of knowledge from our work here. You come here with whole lifetimes of it. So our biggest goal tonight is to, one, hear from you, to get information that we may or may not already know, hear what your appetite is for what you think might be the right solution for Phoenicia. We will also bring our own experience from other places that we'll also try out here, as Mark has said, with a whole variety of different alternatives. We may come back to you in a couple of months and say the thing that would be, the silver bullet here is X. And you may all say, go home, we want nothing to do with that. Okay, we're gonna look at some other things. So part of this LFA process is not someone imposing something on you, it's working collaboratively so we can figure out what works best for this community. Maybe it's protecting against the 50-year storm. Maybe it's okay if the area gets flooded every, long once and again, if the price is right to get that down. If it costs $100 million to reduce flooding, that's probably not going to happen. So it's that kind of iterative conversation. So from here, I think if people want to share thoughts in general, sort of overall observations, we can certainly entertain that for as long as you want. And then we've got mapping spread out along the back tables, and Vernon and Mark and I are happy to sit and talk with you, and we've got markers back there. We can come back in kindergarten. We can write things all over the map and get your input on maybe your specific properties on a one-on-one basis. But first, we certainly want to give anyone who would like to sort of voice their thoughts, opinions, to speak up.
Okay. Can I start, please?
Please
Okay.
do.
Let's give it a small introduction. I'm Ed Swan. I have 14 acres over here off Old Route 28, which is also known as Road over here. That goes right out of Main Street, continues past Uncle Pete's campground. So I own the property where the hiking trail starts roughly there, going down to Uncle Pete's campground. So I got 14 acres there. And one of the big problems I ran across with Irene is, which I'm pretty sure most people are aware of, we have like a slight, almost like a 45-degree break on that surface at the beginning of my property. Like I would say about roughly 400 feet in.
Okay.
And what happened there, it washed out the piping going right into Main Route 28 and almost collapsed the road right there, number one. That's where the Phoenicia Shopping Plaza is. But what had happened in the interim, when the construction team came along, and they spent 4 weeks on that, okay, they built up an island on that particular spot where that stream is there, okay, and to build up the walls and put in the new piping going through Route 28 on there. Now, just to give you a little input, that particular pipe, which is a 6-foot by 6-foot cast iron pipe, that's 6 inches thick, that's laying like, I'd say roughly about 800 feet away on my property from that site where it was washed over. Besides that, I also have a 12-foot long cast iron pipe that was also in there, that's buried on my bank on there. Okay, but to make a long story short, what had happened is we then restructuring that wall there, they built an island so they could work on it, and then about a week later, Lee came along, washed the whole system out again on there. But what happened, all that gravel and rock and everything has displaced itself on my portion of the creek. So the water level is very shallow there, and what really concerns me the most is that where that particular bend is, you're talking like you got like about a 25-foot wide section there. So everything just funnels into there. What happens in the future? flood, you know. I mean, I'm very concerned about it. Because I ended up, my house, I had gotten, I'm raised up with my first floor 9 feet, okay? But my basement was flooded and I had like about 6 to 8 inches and I had 2 inches of mud all throughout that basement, okay? But I have like almost close to a finished basement, but that's my own, I mean, I took care. But just, I'm very concerned, what happens with the next flood coming up, with everything being so shallow and so narrow within that point. You know?
Let's be sure to have you point out on the map exactly
Okay.
where that is. I don't know that part of the stream as well.
Yeah, well, it's right where the little plaza, the Phoenicia plaza is,
Yep.
right there. I would say it's about 600 feet before you get to the plaza, is where that bend is.
And what are the pipes?
I was just gonna ask that
What are
question.
the pipes? What were they for?
They were actually located originally going into, underneath the Route 28. Those were drain pipes.
Oh,
And
that's
they were
great.
replaced. In fact, they put a regular framed out concrete section in there now with a new, much larger pipe. You know, so there's going to be more volume even coming in from the other side of the mountain than I had before, because it's a much larger flow. Before you had like a 2-foot pipe going through on Route 20, cast iron pipe that ended up, like I told you, on my property, and it's still there. So, in other words, so I'm very concerned since it's so narrow, and you do have like a bend right in there, you know, where everything just funnels in. What happens, you know?
And I'm curious, beyond Irene, had you been flooded on a routine basis
No.
prior to that? That was
Well, only I have like a front section of my road and entrance that I used to, I'd say I replaced that when I had the home built about 20 years ago. So I replaced that 4 times over that period. You know, the cover pipes in there. But otherwise, I never had gotten anything in the home. And the only other thing, I don't know if that story exists, if it's true or not, if the portal was open at that time, because my wife and I, we were both there at the house during the flooding, and I never seen anything rise up so fast there that it seemed almost impossible that that was just rainfall, that the portal didn't contribute a little bit to it by having that open. So I'm not sure though, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'd like to back up a second and give a local citizen's perspective to the whole thing. Basically, mountains erode. We had the Arcadian Mountains over across the Hudson, bigger than the Himalayas. They're gone. And all the mountains that are here now are going to continue eroding. Nothing we can do is going to stop that. Now, where does it go? It goes in our streams. And as it comes in the streams, it's gravel washing along, it builds up banks naturally, and then it sends the water into fresh clay banks, turbidity for the next several years. And the only thing to do is stream maintenance. Take those gravel beds out. Shandaken, I understand, they rented, it wasn't theirs, but they rented a crushing outfit. I come from West Virginia, and my dad had a crushing outfit. I used to run it. That's another story. I know about such things. And they crushed sand and rock from these stream beds and used it for the town. It was a natural resource, which we are deprived of now, although we still pay taxes on it. We pay taxes on the streams that are flooding, and there's just millions of dollars worth of gravel and sand in there to be harvested. And anything the town didn't use, they sold to local contractors. So it was a resource. It was, and ever since the 70s, with that change in policy, we've been deprived of that. Plus the deprivation of being considered, they say we can still remove gravel, but they really are very stingy with permits on that. Now, I'll try to make it as brief as possible. I can go on for 2 hours. The second thing, besides going into the new clay banks, these new streams, new positions of the streams, run into infrastructure, bridge structures, foundations, roads, And if we are to coexist with nature here, again, sediment management is absolutely essential. Let's go to Bridge Street. Bridge Street, I was here when the bridge caved in, and that's an interesting story, but I won't go into it. And my kids and I, we swam in the sluices while they were building it and everything. And I think the DEC even admits that the channel is filled in 5 foot now. Okay, I'd say more, but I just been in Pennsylvania all day, so I just tossed these out, but they may show. The design of the bridge is what I'm getting to next. Aside from, say, 5 foot of fill across 150 foot in the deep and then less up through, the design of the bridge, all the bridges up here were the old overhead truss type. Now, overhead truss is, all the strength comes from the top. It's like a rigid suspension bridge. I used to teach bridge structures in college and in high school. The bottom girder was 8 to 10 inches. And then occasionally they had some cross members. You didn't need a lot of strength there. It all came from the top. This is what they replaced it with. And you can see the dam. Okay? You can see what the dam is. This is not to scale or anything, but this is what we have on our Bridge Street Bridge. This is what we have in the Stony Clove Bridge. When Hines and his crew were up here talking about the flood, this was after the 3 mini floods. Dennis Doyle walked over to it was February, bitter cold. And we're standing there before the dredge. And he's looking at it and he says, "This stream bed hasn't changed in over 100 years. I said incredulously, you can't mean that. And he says, "I'm a water hydrologist, I know what I'm talking about." Okay? This is the kind of thing we're up against. Now, fortunately, Lonnie Gale moseyed up about them with his big album. Lonnie Gale's dead. He was, everybody here knows him. Tons of photos of the area. He opened up to the book to a picture of that bridge and a guy underneath it casting. Now, mind you, after the floods there, I would say before the dredging, what was it? 5 foot clearance, maybe 4, it wasn't very much. And here's a guy casting, fly casting over it. Now granted, it was this design of bridge when the picture was taken. And I have a friend who, and of course Dennis's response to that, he says, "That's not this bridge," and he walked away. That's blind. I mean, you can't talk with people who will not discuss something. I have another friend who remembers as a child, he was on his father's shoulders, and I forget why. That picture was taken, by the way, because it was raining. That's why they were casting under the bridge. And so this kid's on his father's shoulders trying to slap the bridge. He couldn't reach it, walking under the bridge. Now that's got to be, what, 12, 15 feet? You know, so, and what is it now? They did not dredge anywhere near enough. When they did, I said, and I'm using the bad word, I know, but when they did, I asked them, "Why don't you go deeper, somewhere where it used to be?" And they said, "We can't." I said, "Why?" And he pointed downstream to the Esopus. He said, "We only have 3 foot, where they did dredge it to, 3 foot to go down to the Esopus." I said, "Aha, well, that's the next problem. The whole Esopus has to be taken out." And when I say, what's the buzzword? Sediment management. You can't just take a pocket of something out. You have to grow from rock outcropping to rock outcropping. For instance, from Railroad Rapids down to Boulder Bend. And then, sure, that'll fill in again from above it. But if you just take a section of that, what's already there is going to move real quickly. I might come through on that, that's a little moot point, but now there's 3 areas. One is the gravel buildup, which I don't think anybody can argue. The second is the bridge type, which I've mentioned, and the third is the flotsam damage. What knocks bridges out isn't usually the water. Water damages the abutments, okay? it washes out the abutments all. And in this kind of bridge, the water can go right through it. It cannot go through the kind that we're getting them all replaced with. I think it's just wrong to do these. These were the kinds that were all done up here, even the little bridges. And they're replaced, systematically replacing with this. I don't know whether they cost less, they're easier to put in or whatever. Woodland Valley Bridge is about halfway this. I think Woodland Valley complained, I don't remember entirely, wasn't as involved in, but they did a smaller girder, about half the size. There are 2 legs, by the way, I only have one showing. And then they put a girder underneath it. Well, that girder is only about 2 feet. Bridge Street is 4 feet.